Hello and welcome to the latest episode of Halcyon. My name is Lorne Rising, I'm going to be your host for this episode. And on this occasion I'm going to be talking about a game that you've all probably played already, because I'm so late to the game in terms of everything I play or watch. Watch Dogs, a game that was postponed for nearly a year, previewed at E3 to massive furore of, oh my god, look at how amazing it looks and all the dynamicism and
We're here at the gallery opening of media mogul Joseph DeMarco's Dot Connection, an eccentric art show featuring 10 of Chicago's top underground artists. As you can see, the turnout is a roaring success. The show runs throughout the month, but DeMarco has announced an upcoming online.
Yeah, you gotta keep them moving.
A few moments later.
You okay?
12 seconds later.
Oh, the special features, and when it was released, got the reception of a warm poo in terms of the comparison between the two. So I come into this game with a fairly fresh perspective because, again, I wasn't really part of the hype that was, by the way, accompanied by the hype for The Last of Us, so there was a direct comparison between the two because they were previewed almost at the same time. And as a result, I don't really have any of the bias of most of the people who got really heavily invested with the hype and the promises and things of that nature. I'm going to look at this game from the purely unbiased perspective of, oh, is it any good? Is it any fun? Does it deliver on what reasonably it should have promised versus what it did promise? Now, what I will say from the get-go is that a lot of people have made comparisons from this game to GTA. And again, I think that's unfair because you're talking about two completely different developers, talking about two different completely styles of play and in terms of its application and what it's trying to set out to achieve in terms of either a social commentary or just a different type of gameplay that we've been used to. Watch Dogs follows the protagonist named Aiden Pearce as he traverses through the world of Chicago, which has been meticulously mapped out in terms of its landscapes and also its interactivity, shall we say, with its citizens and with the applications that surround it, both in terms of hardware and IT. And the idea is that you mess with everything, you hack everything. You've got a little iPhone that can do all sorts of things. And throughout the game, the story follows Aiden as he kind of unravels a mystery in terms of the murder of his niece, the kidnap of his sister, and his dealings with the underworld of Chicago.
I was the best at what I did. A hacker. A thief. I got in, got out. No one got hurt. Until I discovered something I was never meant to see. That's when they came for me, but killed her. Now, I'm coming for them.
And, like I said, was released with a bunch of hype behind it, but ultimately was slated for what people perceived it to underdeliver while it was doing. So on this episode, let's take a look at a game that, like I say, was given some pretty severe hype considering it was a brand new IP, but on the face of it, seems to have a relatively interesting concept. Let's take a look. This is Halcyon, Watch Dogs.
961 Charlie, your squad put out an all-call. We need backup ASAP.
Repeat,
So on this episode I'm going to be coming at it from a slightly different angle. I'm not going to be covering the story or the gameplay first. Let's look at the thing that caused most of the outrage when it came out, the presentation and graphics. In the E3 trailer, I think it's fair to say the graphics look pretty impressive. Things like the weather, the small details like the litter and the leaves on the side of the street, the coat, the way it flailed in the wind. Even the facial animations to an extent were slightly deeper and better detailed. When it was released, nowhere near the same. Much flatter, much less depth of detail, and indeed much less in terms of a realistic feel to the world. However, does that make it a bad looking game? I'd argue no. I'd say again, the world itself is detailed, reasonably interactive, and more to the point, doesn't look terrible. I think where the game falls down in terms of graphics is most of the NPCs look kind of bland. A lot of the backgrounds and environments aren't as interactable and traversable as you would like, considering that this is from the same studio that made Assassin's Creed. And the cars look like the kind of thing that came out of Crazy Taxi back on the PS2. They just don't seem to be that diverse, they don't seem to be that well designed, they don't look aesthetically that pleasing or that bad, they're just eh. In terms of Aiden Pearce's design, his design is pretty cool, and because of the changing costumes, you can deal with how he looks in the way that you want to make him look in terms of color scheme. So the chances are you'll get a configuration or a look to him that you think is pleasing. But as far as the NPCs are concerned, especially in the cutscenes, it just looks a little bit outdated. Especially considering that this was, let's be honest, it was developed for the next gen consoles but released on the current gen consoles for the time. It doesn't look as good as perhaps it should do. Graphically speaking, it doesn't even hold up to things like, going back so far as Red Dead Redemption, I'd say has better lip syncing and more realistic tones for the characters.
Oh, Mr. Marston, good to see you. How have you been keeping?
I'm well, Mr.
Mr. West Dickens. Nigel West Dickens of East Cheap, London, New Waverly, New York, and Armadillo, New Austin. At your service.
At my service.
At everyone's service. At the service of science, of knowledge, of life.
How are your wounds?
Much, much better. But
You gotta believe me, man.
Who gave the order?
I told you. I don't know.
You don't know.
Ain't the family? Not a problem. Nope. Husky, I'm good. You'll never hear from him again.
So what do you think, Maurice?
Did you scare me? It was a job, man. I didn't know.
However, in terms of the music design, it's got a fairly large soundtrack with tracks that you can download from people's iPhones as you traverse through the world. So again, not too bad there. When you're in combat and when you're in missions, it has its own bespoke soundtrack. It gets high-paced and techno-y when you're in gunfights. It's eerily quiet though when you're just wandering around the city. There's nothing really that accompanies you, which has an odd dichotomy at sometimes. There's a lot of ambient noises that accompany you, but it's very quiet a lot of the time, which I would probably argue is not a good thing, considering, like I say, you're not wowed by your surroundings. There's nothing visually that stands out about this game. However, that probably has something to do with the fact that the interactivity of the city, when you whip out your phone and you start seeing what you can mess about with, is designed to better emphasize those things, so that while you're running or gunning or driving, it's very easy to distinguish what you can interact with out of the rest of the world. And as a result of this, like I said, the game looks unremarkable. It doesn't leave a lasting impression on you in terms of just the look of the world. I mean, the art style into the game, the glitching when you're actually you're using your hacking technology and you're in, they're quite interesting. And you'd think that maybe they could incorporate the style into the world a little bit more, but they chose not to for whatever reason. It's a misstep, if you ask me, and a missed opportunity, but nevertheless, I can understand it sort of, to try and keep the world looking as realistic as possible. However, in terms of other aspects of its design, we'll get more onto it in the gameplay section, but suffice it to say, it's not the slickest system or slickest control scheme you'll ever play in your life. And this feeds into the presentation style because it just all feels a little flat. So with the presentation and the graphics out of the way, let's take a look at the gameplay of the game. Okay, so let's kick off with the number one thing that Watch Dogs offers you that supposedly no other game does. The ability to be able to hack. Now, I think it's fair to say that when the game was released, I think people were expecting something a little bit more complex in the system that we were given. We were promised the ability to be able to hack Chicago. The idea being that every electronical aspect of the city was hackable and therefore interactable. Now, in terms of the promise and what I think the game could have actually delivered on, I'd say it did pretty well. The idea being that anything that you can interact with automatically highlights with a reticule, a square or a square of some kind that targets it and tells you how you can interact with it, i.e. if it goes onto traffic lights, you can turn the traffic lights on. If there's roadblocks that pop up from the ground, you can turn them on and hopefully block your pursuers if anyone happens to be chasing you. It goes as well for intercommunications, so if you're on a mission and you happen to see 7 or 8 guys, they probably have some kind of way you can interact with them, i.e. turning on an explosive they have strapped to their chest perhaps, or indeed disabling their phone so they can't call for reinforcements, or indeed creating some kind of diversion, static from the phone, or indeed making it ring somebody so that they're distracted for a moment so that you can take them out. Now the problem with this, I think, is that it is oversimplified. They've tried to attempt to limit your ability by giving you a life bar for your phone. In fact, it's just a battery, it has certain slots. You can upgrade it into 6 slots, so effectively you can use it 6 times, or depending on how much power is allotted to that ability. So if you choose to black out the city, for instance, which you can do, which is pretty cool, it takes 2 bars or 3 bars, so you can't just spam it using just blackouts and disabled. So it does force you to be tactical to an extent, but it recharges over time. So if you're patient, you can overcome a lot of the obstacles that the game puts in your way by just spamming everything before you actually make a move. And this is disappointing because in a game, again, I'm trying to separate from the hype, being presented with this game, being presented with the abilities that you should be able to, with the technology that we know is at our disposal, it just feels like there's a little bit of lack of imagination here, especially when the game doesn't make you earn a lot of these hacks. It's too simple, it's too easy, it makes it feel a little bit, it feels a little cheap, if that's the right word to make it. It just doesn't feel genuine. It makes you feel like you're not a hacker, it makes you feel like you're turning on a cheat, let's say. And this isn't helped by the fact that you'd say, okay, fair enough, it's a new concept though, we're warming to this, we're trying to introduce this to players and we're trying to make them feel at home first, and then maybe in the second game we'll get rolling. Okay, fair enough. But then you come to the other predominant aspect of the game, which is the parkour and the running and gunning. Now, this is where I have a real problem with the game at this point. The running and gunning is poor.
We need more guys! Right! We're in. Let's go.
Shit! He's shooting at me!
What do I mean by this? To hit cover, you press A and the direction. It usually highlights where you can hit cover. Now, the problem with this is that in order to exit cover, you press B and in order to re-engage with cover, you have to press A. So it's this weird 2-button mechanic. Now, in most games, it's just snap. It's usually a top button here, and these buttons are reserved for other things. Now, the reason why they've done this is because the run is mapped to the trigger. So you run like that, and you aim with this button. It's an odd collection of formats that often leaves you in firefights until you get used to it. You do get used to this over time. But in firefights, you can be swarmed and you can't react quickly enough. There's no snap in, snap out. It's a difficult mesh of buttons that doesn't feel ergonomic to the player. At least it doesn't to me. I found myself often in gunfights engaging with masses of enemies that I, for whatever reason, couldn't take out using the technology in my hand. And I'm not a stealth player. I'm a runner and gunner. I have to do it. I can take out maybe a few guys stealthily, and I can explode a few things because, again, you can hack the camera systems in the game. So you can jump from camera to camera, you can survey your surroundings, blipping any nasties or any people that might be in your way. You can take out a few in the interim period by, like I say, setting off traps, exploding various aspects of the map to catch them in the explosion, killing them, or like I said, you can set off explosives that they happen to have on them, or by disabling reinforcements in order to limit any impact they might have should you choose to engage them in a firefight. However, what I learned really quickly is that even on the lower levels, the AI has the ability to be able to just swarm your position. They load up on IEDs and explosives to make you fly out of cover. There's no dive button, so you can't just dive out of the way. Like I say, the only real recourse you have is to try and understand where you're going to go, snap out of cover, dive over the cover, which isn't easy to do, again, because your run isn't mapped to the same button as your jump or your dive over cover. And yeah, it's just a very cumbersome experience. In my opinion, if they'd have mapped everything to one button, i.e. to snap into cover with one button, i.e. up here, and then to run, jump, and traverse the world with parkour with another, it would have been fine, because then you could disengage and engage very simply and easily. In this instance, you have to snap into cover with one button, out with another, run with another, and you have to use parkour with a combination of two, the trigger and B. It's just a very cumbersome experience. Now that's just the gunplay. Don't even get me started on the driving. The driving mechanics in this game are arcadey to say the least. It's very difficult to explain, but there just doesn't seem to be any weight in what you're doing when you're driving. The vehicles just don't seem to have any real feel to them. They feel almost like they're floating on air. In fact, the animations, just going back to the graphics for a second, the animations, you can literally see the bike moving nowhere and the road just moving beyond. It's a very, once you notice this, it's a very, it takes you out of the experience quite a lot.
You can thank me now because I've been tracking that case. What? Now let me check.
That was quick thinking. Ooh, that had to hurt. If we get that briefcase.
Exactly my thoughts. I'm sending the briefcase location now.
And just as a biker, someone that rode bikes for years, the fact that Aiden rides around, can hit something at full pelt, come flying off and not die, and recover moments later with literally no ill effect whatsoever, again, beggars belief why anyone would do that. Now again, it just all helps, makes this gaming experience feel a little bit frustrating. It feels a little bit numb, and because of a lot of these things, in terms of the driving, for instance, you can't shoot when you're driving. Now if you can, I haven't figured it out. It's not natural in terms of having the shoot button here or whatever the case may be. You can pull up to junctions and set traps for people, but it's, again, the idea that Aiden is somehow a good guy means that he can't shoot from his car. Why not? The gunmen are allowed to pull up and just shoot the hell out of your tires, but you have to physically drive ahead of them, pull up, get out of your car, put it in the position, and hope that they don't swarm your position before you can even fire a shot back. Oh, but Lorne, you've got the added bonus of being able to use the traffic lights and the strap. They are so much more difficult to master than you realise, especially considering that the driving mechanics, again, oddly, the A button is mapped to look behind you. Now I get why they've done this, to try and make the experience of driving and setting off traps much more easy to utilise. However, if you're pressing A, you can't press X at the same time. And that's what 2-button combination you have to use. You have to press the A button in order to look behind you to time it when it's right. It sometimes flashes up to say neutralize on the thing that you're trying to drive by. So for instance, if you're being pursued and you go through some traffic lights, it will sometimes flash in the same place that you can press X to execute the traffic light move, if you want to call it that, to eradicate or to neutralize your pursuers. However, the window for this is so minute and it doesn't always work. So in order to properly time this, you have to look behind you. But in order to look behind you, you have to press the A button. Now, I'm sorry, I wasn't born in Wellingborough, so I don't have 6 fingers in order to be able to properly utilize the A and the X at the same time. Again, it's just a very frustrating design choice, and one that I don't understand in terms of being able to justify to players that this makes the game fun. And this is the overarching thing that I keep on coming across when I'm playing Watch Dogs. Nothing is any fun. The missions, for instance, are usually something along the lines of taking your abilities as they are before and introducing yet another one and trying to crank up the difficulty a little bit. The prison scene, for instance, had all the properties and all the abilities to be able to be a really tense affair. One that made you push to the limit in terms of your ability to be able to rely on just your phone and your skills. Or better yet, take the phone away for a little bit. Let him get gritty, let him get use his more physical capabilities and gunplay and stealth a little bit more. But no, it's just a wasted opportunity because all you do is you sneak around, don't kill anybody, and then somehow have a full-blown gunfight in the basement of a prison with shotguns, and there's like 7 guys and 1 guy with a machine gun, and no police turn up. And it's the middle of the night, so it's not like there's like a parade or something going on outside to sort of dampen the noise. It's ridiculous how preposterous that situation is. And yet, it had all the hallmarks of being something that could have been easily really iconic, really memorable, really fun. But for whatever reason, it just drops the ball there. And it's, like I said, it's an amalgamation of what I think this game's fundamental problem is. It's not the graphics and it's not, you know, the lack of abilities with the city. It's not that fun. And the gameplay just doesn't do anything to help that because again, it feels numb, disjointed, it feels ill thought out, and it feels like they tried to throw too much at the same time without maybe having 2 different types of mechanics or a flip mechanic or whatever the case may be, just to make it a bit easier to be able to cycle through the abilities and be able to utilize everything at disposal more easily. And in terms of what there is to do in this world, okay, again, coming back to this fun aspect, the story missions take up a lot of your time, but when you're not in story missions, you will get randomly generated events. Now, again, this wouldn't be such a bad thing because like in Red Dead Redemption, for instance, you come across these things and they're usually different and diverse and you're not too sure what you're going to come across when you actually rock up. It could just as easily be a damsel being pursued by coyotes. It could just be someone who needs a couple of bucks to see him through. It could be a damsel in distress that's actually a part of a gang that's going to mug your ass. Anything could happen. In Watch Dogs, you get a guy walking up to another guy and then he either shoots him, stabs him, mugs him and runs off. And that's it. Every single time. You have a crime probability meter that tells you how close they are to perpetuating a crime. You have a victim meter which tells if someone is possibly going to be a victim of a crime. And you have to sit there like a chump, hiding and waiting for someone to actually commit a crime before you can preempt. You're a vigilante! Why would you wait for that sort of thing? You're going to break the law by enforcing it on him anyway. So why would you sit there and do nothing until someone actually does get stabbed or shot? It makes no sense whatsoever. So take the logic out of the equation for a second. Take the fact that literally you're going to sit there and go, he's not done the crime yet, but I know he's going to. He's not done it, he's not done it, he's not doing it. Okay, he's doing it. And then you go for it. Take that out of the equation for a second, how stupid that is. It's the same thing, over and over and over again. And it's the only way that you can rebuild it. There's a meter, and I don't know why it's there. There's a meter in the top right-hand corner of your screen which tells you where your standing is with the people. If you let it overflow from one side, you're deemed a criminal, and the masses will hate you, and they will take out their phones and take pictures of you. The police will be after you constantly for and you're going to have to get very good at evading the police and CTOS, the sort of big brother system of the city. However, if you save the people, if you hit someone in the leg and then in the face with your baton over and over again, you become known as the vigilante, and the people like you, and they won't give tidbits to the police about where you are, and they won't be so quick to judge you. And it's a grind, because in order to get around the fact that the police are going to be pursuing you, you have to do this over and over and over again. And in missions, it's sometimes very difficult not to whip out a grenade launcher and just start unloading on people to even the odds a little bit. And there's some collateral. Unfortunately, people do get killed. And it's such a frustrating thing when you're traversing the city in some of these cars that don't work properly and they don't handle properly, and you'll just be innocently cruising along at 150 miles an hour, and you'll careen into a crowd of people, killing hundreds of thousands of them. Probably not, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but more to the point, you'll careen into a bunch of them, and unfortunately, they will die, or even injured. Even if you injure somebody, your rating with the city goes down. Now, I'm sorry, how if you're in the car and you're covering your face and you've got this digital footprint thing that follows you around, so when you see yourself on cameras, for instance, this is actually kind of cool. When you see yourself on a camera, it will digitize it and censor it out so that you can't be identified by people. So that eliminates that right there. People don't know who you are via that means, which means you can only rely on witness testimony. Now, if I'm careening around at 150 miles an hour with a mask on and a hat in a darkened car, how's anyone meant to know it was me driving it? Especially when I stole it using a code that lets me enter into any car that I want. The logic there, it makes no sense. And again, this sense of lack of fun comes down to this game's odd dichotomy of trying to stay realistic with how you can interact with its world, but then allowing you to do preposterous and ridiculous things, like I said, crashing into a wall with 150 miles an hour on a bike and walking away from it. It's just odd. It's an odd mesh of the two, which doesn't blend well and leads to a lot of frustration when you're trying to balance out just playing the game and traversing the world. Because unlike Grand Theft Auto, where you can just evade the police and eventually do whatever you want, this game holds you accountable for a lot of your actions. You can't shoot people, you can't go on sprees and things like that. And I get it's a different type of game, but it's a free world game. What kind of free world game handcuffs you and says you can't do certain things? Again, you're coming from the developer of something like Assassin's Creed. Simple things like you can't parkour up ledges. If there's a box, you can climb onto that box, and then you can climb onto another box, and then you can climb up there. But in Assassin's Creed, you could do that and more. You could climb up buildings with ledges and things and navigate your way up top buildings. Well, why can't you here? It's the same developer. It's the same pretense. This should have been Assassin's Creed up to date. This should have been the modern day version we were promised right from the get-go with Assassin's Creed. And I hate the fact that when you there's no grapple, there's no nothing. Like, Aiden's never come across a situation where you need to get from the top of a building to the bottom of a building. Why wouldn't you have something like that? It just makes the world that much more frustrating to traverse across. You've got fast travel and things like that, but again, only to certain points. It's frustrating again, and it just makes getting through the game more of a chore than it needs to be. However, when you're bored of playing the story and when you don't want to be the vigilante, there's some side quests, some side missions, if you want to call it that. You've got a collection of cars where you'd race from car to car to car to deliver them to a certain point by a certain time. It earns you cash. You can also perform gang hits. So if you'll be given a route that the baddies are going to take, and at some point on the route you have to take someone down. Not kill them, you have to take them down, which means usually going through a bunch of their buddies by killing them first, and then taking out that one particular guy so that he can go back to his non-existent gang and tell them all about how you got f***ed over. Again, it's an interesting perspective, and if the game allowed you more than one way of being able to take them out by setting traps in a more dynamic way, kind of in the vein of a hitman, then maybe I'd give this mode a little bit more credence. But again, it's the same thing over and over and over again. It's a car convoy. It's never something interesting like a gang meeting, or they're walking through the street, or they're at an event. It's always something that's kind of bland and a bit generic. You've also got these random occurring events whereby you can scan people's phones and it will tell you things about them. So it will give you their name, their occupation, and often an odd fact. Now these things can make you chuckle. It's you know, it's one of those situations where the invasion of privacy is actually kind of funny. However, on the rare occasion that you do try to steal from some of these people, because they will flash up as a blue icon rather than a white one to say that you can, there's something about their phone that you can hack and steal. So if it's money, which again, by the way, breaks the game. You're low on cash, just spend 10 minutes going blip, 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 all of your money, all of it's mine, thank you very much. On the rare occasion though, you'll come across what's called a Bloom operative. They're individuals that will then report your actions, having been hacked, to the authorities who will then chase you down. Again, you can break this though, because you can just walk right up behind them and say, hey, give me your phone, smash, don't do that again. Why put that in there? Why not have them just report it to them anonymously, and makes you maybe more wary of hacking someone's phone? Makes you think twice about it because you might get caught. Rather than, well, if it just says Bloom operative there, I'll hack them and just follow right behind them and then smash their phone. Same with calling the police. If you shoot someone in the face right in the middle of the street and someone calls the police, you just walk up to that behind that person who's calling the police and go, no. Breaks the game, completely breaks the game. So in terms of the gameplay, the way to sum it up is this. It's an interesting concept. It has all the materials there for the second one to take the reins and do much better. But as an execution on this occasion, it falls woefully short of being a game that I would set to one side and say, I want to play that game for hours and hours on end. It's a disappointment. And like I say, it lays the groundwork for what will effectively be a really good second game, and I'm looking forward to seeing what they do with these mechanics and taking them into the second one. But unfortunately on this occasion, the gameplay just doesn't really live up to the standard. So that leaves only one way that this game can be redeemed in my eyes as a game that I want to pick up and play forever and ever. The story.
No, I think you're 9. 10. 9. 10. 9. 10. Well, in that case, you deserve 10 birthday tickles.
What?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9,
10. 10.
10. Stay here for a second. So, an entire year and...
Late. Yeah, I'm sorry, Nate. Really.
Come here. Let's have a look at you. You look older.
Oh, nice. Thanks for that.
And so we come to the final aspect of the game, the story. It's not very good. I'll do a spoiler-free version for you because I'm not spoiling much. The story focuses around Aiden Pearce. And this criticism's probably been leveled at him a million times at this point, but he's trying too hard to be Batman. The deep voice, this aversion to actually killing anybody, but still somehow killing people along the way. This moral high ground that he takes despite hacking people's phones. It's odd to be the good guy in a game when you go across someone and you're looking to hack people and it tells you on their little description, has leukemia, rich bank account, steal. What game would allow you to do that and then you can't get away with killing people on the street? It's an odd moral balancing act that the game makes you do. I think though that overall the story is what people should have expected this kind of game to have, which is a story that thinks it's being cooler than it is. The problem is that it has an interesting enough premise, and even as vanilla as the main character is, that could have been worked if the villain was some kind of excellent, over-the-top, maniacal scene stealer. But this guy, Lucky, and he looks frail as f***. I know he stabbed someone in your first interaction with him, but that's only after he's fought off his main guy, and he's, you know, been surrounded by a bunch of people, and then he gets shanked. I mean, big freaking whoop.
Someone knew. I swear, I don't know what happened. There wasn't supposed to be anybody. I mean, it's a computer plant, right? I turn around, the alarm's going off. The cops got there so fast. I didn't...
quiet now. It's all over, son.
I got it, at least, right? That's what matters.
It is indeed what matters most.
A few moments later.
Mr. Quimper!
Anyone could have done that. It doesn't take a maniacal villain to do. And yes, the tapestry of circumstances leads back to the one fateful day where I became Aiden Pearce. Obviously he goes by the name Vigilante, which isn't his self-professed name, but it's how he's known by. But the mask, the long coat, the gadgets, it's all basically Ubisoft's way of trying to go, he's Batman, but not. It's something that should have been looked over a bit more, because I think that the game's over-reliance on its premise and the thought that its gameplay would carry it over with a vanilla story has what's let it down here. The writing and the twists and turns that it makes and the nonsensical shit that happens along the way. This guy Damien, who you can tell is going to be a smarmy son of a bitch right from the get-off, just by the way that his face is and the beanie and the seriously, they're telegraphing the fact that this guy's going to be a douche to you.
Look at that. Secrets and lies floating in a cloud of data. I just reach out, pluck it from the sky, and it's mine.
It's ours. Stay focused. You got a nasty security system. How much we got?
100 grand in 30 seconds. God bless the rich and famous. We are the modern day magicians, siphoning bank accounts out of thin air.
Do you hear yourself?
It just feels underwhelming, it feels undercooked, and ultimately it feels like they were gambling too much on the novelty factor of the electronical interaction with the city. And the supporting cast aren't good enough as well. The kid that doesn't talk, the sister that holds his hand while scolding him and saying, I don't like what you do. It's not a scene and a setting where you'd have that kind of conversation. It's very numb to its own subject matter. I think that if it had been a more solitary story, and Aiden had been more isolated in terms of his application, his interaction with people, then that really would have emphasised this idea that technology is taking over. It would have been a social commentary worth actually investing in. But because he interacts with people on a regular basis, at first threatening them, saying, don't come near me, I will kill you, and then turning around and going, yeah, you're kind of hot, I'm gonna go over here now.
Threatening my family, and at the same moment, the mysterious bad boy wants to meet me, and he is a she. He is a lie. Listen, I need to trust you, Clara.
I wouldn't trust me if I were you. But here's a reason to listen.
A few moments later.
We work together. You with everything I just said. Me tracking his signal.
You're not quite what I expected.
And you're exactly as I expected, Aiden.
It just... What? 1 second you've got... When he meets a female protagonist for the first time, he tries to intimidate her, and then in the very next moment, I need you to trust me. Why the f*** would anyone trust you in that situation, you muppet? It makes no sense from a writing perspective and from a character perspective. He flip-flops from being sensitive to a hard-nosed, callous It's inconsistent, and it really makes it hard to invest in his character as a protagonist and a hero. So again, the story lets you feel a little bit less of investment than perhaps you should, given everything that I've said about its presentation and gameplay. So, my overall impression. God damn, this game's got some potential for the second. And weirdly enough, because of this game, I'm now more hyped to play the second than I would have been had I not played it. The reason for this is because everything is there, the groundwork is there and it's solid. It can be tweaked and it can be honed to make it better. And more to the point, what is here now is enough to see you through your experience. And I'm talking maybe 15 to 20 hours worth of gameplay if you're slow like me. If you're a quick burst and you ignore all the side events and you're kind of happy to not whiz through with all the top weapons and spamming and grinding for those, then you can maybe get through this in about 10 hours. But for me though, a game has to have either a really strong narrative or it has to have a really interesting and a really fun game mechanic. It falls short on both of those points. Graphically though, I never really had any qualms with it. It is what it is. I play Skyrim and I play in Pokemon Blue, Yellow and Red, irrespective of their graphics. The graphics can look terrible, but the gameplay is always what brings me back because it gives me a level of investment and it gives me an outlet to fantasy and roleplay. In this game though, it inhibits you too much to let you get invested to that sort of level. And with those handcuffs on, you always feel this sense of it being just a little bit out of reach. The fun is there, it's just so close but so far away from you. If you're going to play this game, if you've never played this game before, go into it knowing that it will not live up to your expectation. Even if you set them really low like me, you'll walk out of this experience wondering what might have been. But hopefully like me, because of that, you'll want to play the second one and you'll want to give it a go to the point where, okay, let's see if they've learnt their lessons. Let's see if they've built on this. Let's see if they've improved the functionality. Let's see if they've improved the graphics. Let's see if they've toned up the story. Let's see if they've started making this game just fun. On that basis and that basis alone, I'm going to give this game a rating out of 10 of a 6. It's about average or a little bit above average in terms of the graphics are good, but they're not groundbreaking and earth-shatteringly good. The diversity of, let's say, the cars, the weapons are too small. It's just all in all, it's a very inhibitive experience, which is ironic considering that with a phone that you can use to break any kind of technology, should have been one of the most free and air and just all this, wow, everything is at my fingertips. I can do whatever I want in this world. And yet somehow, at every turn this game snaps your hand and says, no, don't do that. You can't do that. That's naughty. No. No. It's a frustrating experience to say the least, but there is some fun to be had in spurts, and it isn't a bad game to play if you've got literally nothing to do, like me. So like I said, pick this up if you haven't played it before, but only under the pretense that you want to get invested in the second game, hoping that they've taken a very solid foundation and built on it and made it even better. So thank you very much for watching this episode of Halcyon. Please like, share and subscribe. Please leave your comments in the comment section below for anything that you think I should comment on or produce content on next. Also, please check out some of the other content creators in the description below. Show some likes, some shares, just some watches, and I'm sure they'd really appreciate it. And thank you very much for checking out some of the other episodes. If you have recently, I've tried to step up my content creation a little bit to try and satiate the people out there. I know I've been a bit lax in producing content of this kind of length recently, so I thought I'd make up for it. In the meantime, take care of yourselves, stay tuned for the next episode, and I'll see you guys real soon.